right, so I've started to share the desktop. Hopefully everyone can see what I'm seeing, which is my calendar at the moment. Meeting is now being recorded. Please just say if it's unclear or if the audio is unclear or if you want to say anything else, because I can no longer see the chat window. Okay, so let me just switch to here, which is the PowerPoint of all the contributions that have been made that were sent in by various people, and we will get to this in a minute. I guess I'm going to default to the PowerPoint when we get to those points. But what I'd like to do is to go for the to the agenda. So this was the agenda that was posted. Hopefully, the screen share allows you to see the text clearly enough. It's a little bit small, maybe for some people. Now, there were a lot of things on the agenda, kind of split half between how the project works, in other words, things to do with the website, and also things to do squarely to do with the science of the chemistry and biology. Now, the agenda was written in a certain order because that was determined by the way that the action items were done from the last meeting. But what I might want to, I think I'm going to do is prioritize heavily the chemistry and biology today for the meeting, and then perhaps at a future date, so perhaps next month, when I'm back in Sydney, we could have a meeting which is more focused on how the websites work and what to do about making sure that people can find that came up as an action items and which were collated usefully on GitHub, which Alice did. Things to do with usability of sites on the landing page. Again, I think we'll postpone that to the next meeting. B would be engaging more team members. Again, I think I'd like to postpone that slightly, although engaging perhaps interns or project students with an interest in the popularization of science to help with the writing of the wiki is something that we can look at before any other meeting. It's something I haven't had time to do yet, but we would like to actively engage people to help maintain the wiki, which is the central place where project status is being kept. There's stuff to do with data sharing and visualization. I might just quickly mention this because there's been a really nice new website, app developed by Mike Robbins, who couldn't be with us today. But he has done something very nice, which I'd urge you to take a look at, because I'd like to adapt this and make sure that it's suitable for everyone's purposes. What he's done is work very closely to the sort of specs I gave him, which was to use the SD file for the project and generate on the fly a visual list of the compounds that are being looked at in the project in a way that we could easily tune and modify how the molecules were being displayed so that we can include the structures and the potencies and any other links to do with compounds as we needed. But crucially, it was being generated from the SD file. So we didn't need to maintain a list of compounds elsewhere. We could just use the data as they were. So for some reason, of course, always with live demos, it never works, right? There was a lot of discussion on this issue, which you can read about, but I'd urge you to look at that. I don't know why it's not loading right now, but I'd urge you to look at that and see what you think about that. I think it's a very powerful thing that's being done there. So I think it's rather good. But we can postpone that to a future meeting. Okay, so much of the rest of this stuff is to do with the chemistry and biology, so we can focus in on that now. And the first item that came up was the resynthesis of one of the ethyl-link compounds, so MAV 670652, which was this compound. And this was something that was being looked at by Alice. So this was this compound that was a known compound. And one of the action items from the last meeting was to resynthesize this compound as a representative compound, for the series that was of interest, and to synthesize as a racemate, ideally, and then separate the enantiomers. And there was some discussion about how we might do that. The synthesis is ongoing, and what I'd like to do is ask Alice to come in at this point and just give a short update as to where we are with that compound.
Hello.
If that's okay, Alice.
Hi. I don't. Have you got the slide map that you could put up? The synthesis.
Hi.
Back.
Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon.
So there's two parts. Oh no, sorry. You're right.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so
Back, sorry, is it?
You've just gone past the first part.
Yeah, I think it's further down. Yeah.
So it's above Patrick's slide. Yeah. So that
Sorry.
I can speak a bit about that and a bit about Patrick. So, basically, we were following a CRO prep for this synthesis, and the first couple of steps worked fine. We had some problems with reproducing the cyclization, and Patrick and Devon and Idovi also found that, I think, in Edinburgh, that according to the prep that was in the CRO manuscript, it didn't work at the dilutions that they'd stated. I think it's just that the starting material is very insoluble. So I got the reaction to work now with a very low yield, but I could get 17% yield, so at least I've got hundreds of milligrams of this intermediate 19, but that's a bit of a problem. I think Patrick's students are working on trying to optimize that, and they've tried some different oxidants. I tried some different conditions with oxidants that we had and solvents that we had, but I've just accepted for the moment that I've got some of that material because I was keen to push on through and I really wanted to finish the synthesis before Christmas. I think Patrick's got some conditions on the next slide too, Matt, but maybe I won't talk through those so much. But he found that the use of chloramine T, which had been suggested by Steph and Deborah, and I think Joey as well in the chat room. It did. You could produce the product, but again, the yields aren't great for this. So if this is a route and this particular class of compounds are something we need to make, then we probably need to try and look at a way to get this core chloride in a better yield. But for the moment, we have some to use, so that's the main thing at the moment, to try and push forward the synthesis. And then, Matt, if you wouldn't mind to click onto the next slide. So this is where I'm up to at the moment. I'm trying to do this difluoromethylation. It took me a little bit longer to get to compound 23 than I'd hoped. I had some problems with the cyanation, which in the CRO prep was using TMS cyanide with TBA-CN. And initially, I think it was just the stuff we had in the store was really old or poor quality. We had to wait for some more to come in. And then the reaction was a bit capricious, so it would sometimes work, even with really, well dried starting materials and reagents. It didn't seem to be reliably scalable, so I found another procedure using zinc chloride instead of this TBA-CN, which seems to be very hygroscopic, and it's just very humid in Sydney at the moment, so it's quite hard to completely get rid of the moisture. And basically it didn't work so well with the zinc chloride from the bottle, but when we refluxed the zinc chloride in a phenyl chloride and dried it, then the reaction worked quite nicely. So I think that's sorted. And on a smaller scale than the CRO, over the 3 steps from 20 to 23, I could get 79% yield rather than 57% yield. So that seems to be quite robust. So if you don't mind just clicking back to the previous slide, Matt, sorry, number 7. This is where I'm at with the chemistry. So just for those who haven't read the CRO paper, this difluoromethylation was done using Freon in the CRO data, and it was a procedure, I think, using sodium hydride and Freon. I can't remember the solvent off the top of my head, but we can't obtain Freon. So Joey suggested this class of reagent, which you can see just above the condition slide. So this reagent's actually called trimethylsilyl 2,2-difluoro-2-fluorosulfonyl acetate, and basically I think it forms a a difluorocarbene, which is the reactive intermediate in this reaction. And there's one set of conditions that I found in the literature which use cesium fluoride and sodium hydride for the difluoromethylation of alcohols, the phenolic alcohols actually, and I can't get that reaction to work. So I also tried some that Joey had mentioned last time in the meeting, which we didn't have a prep for, but she suggested using copper iodide and sealed tube reactions, but so far I'm having no joy with this reaction. We have got a more, I hesitate to say more reactive. We've got the acid of the reagent that's just above the conditions, so without the TMS group, which I can try. It's supposed to work under the very similar conditions to the cesium fluoride reaction, but that we've hesitated to use that so far. Well, not hesitated, but we've tried not to use it so far because it's very toxic. So that's one for the new year. I just couldn't get this reaction to work, and this is the key step really, because the other reactions are trivial for the synthesis. So this is a problem that I need to solve. Is this difluoromethylation, or whether we make the trifluoromethylated compound, or we make another analog. I know we need this compound, you know, to separate the enantiomers, but this is the step that I need some help with, I guess, or need to find some other conditions. There doesn't seem to be very many in the literature, so that's something I need to work on. The subsequent sketch is just it's a lithium aluminium hydride reduction of the ester to the alcohol, steps, and then it's just a direct coupling to the chloride. And I also have the bromide pre-prepared of the, sorry, not the cyano compound of the chloride, but I've got the bromide. So I've got another, potential to make another compound of the similar class, and maybe to functionalize off the bromide. So that's where I'm up to this compound. I really wanted to get this done before Christmas, but I just couldn't quite get this reaction to work yet. Yeah, I've tried a couple more soon.
Yeah, lots of different conditions there. I guess in terms of the amount we need, so assuming that we want to separate enantiomers in
I
recent
hope
studies,
so. I think I've got enough for that.
The final compound would be 20, which does imply that the amount that you've currently got of the chloride is enough.
So I've been trying to think about, I think I've maybe got an idea for making a hypervalent iodine reagent from the the difluoromethyl group. But again, this is it's a bit hand wavy, because I mean, I've looked pretty hard and I can't find great precedent for this reaction. So maybe we need to maybe ask anyone if they have experience of this, or if Joey had a more detailed prep for the sealed tube reaction, or if anyone knows another idea for this.
So just a couple of questions, for anyone else who wants to jump in here. A couple of questions. One is any questions about the chemistry. Two is whether we could get away with not using the difluoromethyl, right? So instead using the trifluoromethyl, which would simplify, I guess, the chemistry. So does anyone, Jerry or Paul or anyone else, want to?
Hi, it's Paul. So I guess I don't. Hi, it's Paul. So I guess I don't know the SCR off the top of my head, but we can check back whether the CF3 is likely to be an acceptable replacement. I can't remember whether they've tried that, but it's a great suggestion, and we can look at that as an alternative. I mean, I think it would be useful to get the difluoro. What we can do is we can try and go back to the CRO and see if we can get some
Hello,
more specific
everyone.
conditions of exactly how
Right,
they.
yeah, that would be very good.
This is Joey. I'm not sure if I have a more detailed prep for the difluoromethylation, and I do not recall seeing the trifluoromethyl ether either, but it might be worth going back and, like Paul said, taking a look.
Great, thank you. Yes, it would be useful just to check that, because what was quite striking about some of the original data was that the difluoro was really throughout the data, the difluoro was being used, and again, it would just be interesting to know if we can know whether that was because that compound, sorry, that side chain worked better, that group worked better, or it was just because that was what was being made, and they hadn't tried the trifluoromethyl. If there's information about that, it'd be great to know. If there's not, it doesn't matter, and I think we'll persevere with that compound. But Alice has done a huge amount here to get this thing nearly ready, and I'm sure it'll yield to her pressure in January. And then when we are close to finishing that, then we can finalize who and how we're going to do the separation of enantiomers. I think it'll be an interesting thing for the community to try and do is to secure some way of separating about 100 milligrams of this compound using exhausters that are around. And there was a GitHub issue that I posted with some possibilities of that, so we'll pursue those after Christmas. While we're on this subject of some of this chemistry, yes, there was this issue of other ways of accessing the chloride, I guess. There was some work that was being done by Edinburgh group on this cyclization. Yeah, so there's the chloramine T work of trying to get this thing to cyclize. Now, as far as I remember, so Patrick unfortunately couldn't be with us today. Devon's here. If Devon, you wanted to say anything, then please just enable your audio and jump in. But as far as I understand it, it's looking like the chloramine T is going to give us a decent yield of this chloride. And that's quite exciting. I don't remember there being an accurate yield of this compound being isolated from this reaction. Maybe behind the times on that. It looks like we're getting good conversion, and the NMRs are looking good at the crude. So that's a possible way of getting this thing in another way to access this compound. And the reason why this compound is useful going forwards is because this compound, it may also be a route into some of the amides that we're talking about too, if we can get this carbonylation reaction to work, which we'll talk about in a second. So there is still value beyond the existing compound that we were just talking about in pursuing the chloride as a feedstock for the carbonylation reaction. So existing work is going on in that in Edinburgh too, as well as in Sydney. So it's useful if we can. Now, just again to carry on talking about the chemistry for a little bit here, we did talk a little bit about routes to the amides. If we can now talk about the amides, let me just check that we're on getting too much. So we talked about this resynthesis of the compound, which is ongoing, and I think will be done in January. And then we're talking about the next item on the agenda was devising synthesis for the amides, and there was a lot of discussion about ways that we could get these amides. And there were two approaches that were seen as being good, and Alice summarized these here. So these are routes that not necessarily have been done, but which are the ones that look promising for accessing the amides themselves. And one was carbonylation reaction, which we'll talk about in a second. And the other was to make this central compound here, which has the chlorine on one side and a carboxylic acid on the other. And this comes from a route that was from the CRO. Now, this slide here came from Jerry, who laboriously went through a lot of the CRO work and extracted the chemistry that was done to do the I'm sorry, this is the carbonylation reaction. Do the carbonylation reaction. So these are the reactions which were, I think, reported. Now, from what it looked like from the data is that the carbonylation approach didn't seem to yield anything, right? So the reactions appeared not to give compound 2, as far as I'm aware. I just wondered, so for people who haven't seen the correspondence, whether Alice and Joey would like to come in on this slide to just update everyone on what appeared to be the conclusion from the CRO attempts to get this carbonylation
Sure. This is Joey. When I went through and looked at all of the CRO weekly reports, I went through and tried to extract anything in which they looked like they tried to functionalize the aryl chloride. What I found was it didn't, in their limited attempts to undergo carbonylation or cyanation of that aryl chloride, that it didn't react. And so I was hesitant to say that this wouldn't be a potential pathway forward, because I still think that under the right conditions that aryl chloride should undergo a carbonylation, but in the limited number of attempts, which are 5 shown here, that aryl chloride was not functionalized in the desired fashion.
Thank you, Joey. Alice, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say I really agree with Joey, and I think that this carbonylation is definitely something that could work. My worry is, well, although this looks like a really interesting reaction to optimize, and I'd be keen to do it, my worry is until we have a reliable route to get this chloride, so until this oxidation reaction's been sorted, the porosity of the material for this starting material makes me a little bit more encouraged to initially pursue the route that Joey really kindly extracted from the CRO for us, which is just on the slide before, Matt, on slide number 3, if you wouldn't mind changing to that slide. So although this chloride, this compound number 1, it's pretty expensive. Well, it's relatively expensive compared to the other starting material. We're waiting on some of this in Sydney. And I think this is the way that we're going to go in January, and when the students start. Initially, I think we'll start using this route, and once we've cracked this cyclization, then I think it would be worth exploring this carbonylation. But you know, I think we could use a lot of material, waste a lot of material, rather than just trying to be as quick as possible, which I think is probably starting from 1. I don't know what anyone else feels. That's my opinion at the moment.
Anyone else want to come in on that? I've got something to say, but anyone else want to talk about this route that's on the screen?
So I'll just comment regarding that route that was extracted from the CRO. It is the route that they utilize to prepare quite a few different amides. So my feeling from looking at the reports is that it is a robust and reproducible route. And I agree with Alice, is that I think it would be a lot of fun to optimize that carbonylation, because I do think it could be a nice convergent route. This might be the more reproducible way to go at the moment.
Yes, I mean the cyclization, the last step there, of course, remains as an issue, right? So the if we continue to have oxidative cyclization problems with the other route, then it may also be a problem with this route, I guess.
Sorry, I was just going to say that both Patrick and Stefan, we can't quite see the whole slide, Matt, so if you wouldn't mind scrolling down so that we could see Patrick's, the box with Patrick's name in, and the box with Stefan's work and Sabin's suggestions. So there are, as well as the fact that we can purchase this material number 1, Patrick's come up with a route that has precedent in the literature, and Stefan and Sabin have both suggested potentially more expedient routes. So Stefan's working on this cyanation followed by hydrolysis. And we haven't got any news from him yet, but he said he's working on that at the moment. And Sabin suggested this oxidation, like quite with a heavy-handed oxidant, but this could be another way to get to one, but if we needed more of it. So hopefully if we push through the synthesis from the commercial compound, maybe Stefan or Sabin will have some joy, and then we can, you know, have greater quantities of it.
Yes, I think the Stefan is definitely looking at that reaction. He's actually doing chemistry. The students are doing chemistry. Sabin, as far as I remember, this was a suggestion for what we could do, and as far as I think I'm right in thinking that Sabin is not volunteering to do this reaction himself. But I guess it depends. It'd be great if he did, but I'm not sure if that's the case. I think that's just a suggestion at the moment. And Patrick, I think, has found this route and is the suggestion. Am I right in thinking that this is going to be something which is going to be looked at actively in the Patrick's route? Okay, so Sabin's is theoretical at the moment, but the other two are actually being pursued, and that might be an alternative way of doing this. So I guess if we can handle the slight uncertainty of the final cyclization from 4 till 5 on this slide, then the rest of the chemistry is looking fairly good there, and is a little bit more reliable perhaps than developing new carbonylation chemistry. So I guess that's the priority, is to go after the route that's on the screen from using the starting material from some source. Oh, I see. Alice says compound 7 here is commercially available. Yes, that's very useful indeed, because that gets around the difluoromethylation problem. Okay, so that's covered a lot of ground with the chemistry of the triazola pyrazine compounds, and goes to the synthesis of the amides, which is still the sort of prime focus of the project here, is to make some of these amides. So just returning to the I think the synthetic plan has been well worked out by contributions from several. The next item on the agenda was consideration of different cores for the triazola pyrazines, but I think we should postpone that until a future meeting, because I think that perhaps we need to complete the synthesis of some of these amides first before we worry about changing the core. It's still very much an active action item, but I think we should wait till we've done a series of evaluations of existing compounds in the amide series. And then what I was going to, oh yeah, sorry, just while we're talking about the chemistry on the agenda item 2 here, it's on the screen. We've dealt with the A and B here, but see, there was an update from Stefan who couldn't join us, I think because of the hour in America is not particularly sociable. But as shown there on the agenda, he sent me an email with some comments about what's happening in January, where he's got a couple of students who'll be working a little bit on trying to get to that central acid. So that shows that he's actively pursuing the route that he suggested, and perhaps some others, to get to that central acid, which would be very useful to try and do some reaction optimization work to get to. Now, the other item, I guess, we can talk about some of the biology in a moment, but I was hoping we could just, while we're talking about chemistry, actually no, I think before we talk about which amides we're targeting, I think we should I guess go to some of the biology, because that will influence that conversation. Unless there are any final comments from anybody on any of the chemistry towards some of these amide compounds or anything else. Series 4 compounds, the triazola pyrazines. If not, then I'd like to go to some of the biology that came through recently. So several of the compounds that have been made already historically as part of this project were sent for evaluation for solubility and metabolism. studies, so clearance, and then met ID studies. Compounds that were sent for solubility and clearance studies are shown on the screen there. So this is a part of the wiki now. I uploaded it to the wiki this morning. So those are the structures that were sent to Sue Charman's lab. And then 3 other compounds were also sent for metabolism ID studies, and those are these 3 compounds shown here. So there they all are. Now, I guess before we just talk about the data that were obtained from the Charman lab, I was interested in looking at these compounds that there is no overlap between the 2 sets. So the set that was sent for physicochemical and metabolism studies were different from the set that was sent for med-ID studies. I was hoping just to get a little bit of background as to the nature of the compounds and why they were selected. I was hoping that perhaps Joey or Paul could just say a couple of comments about perhaps why these compounds were sent, just as opposed to any others. If it was a general selection, that's fine. I just wondered if I was missing something in terms of why these compounds were prioritized, and perhaps why the sets of the 2 were different.
So this is Joey from MMV. The first set contains a variety of different side chains. We are interested in understanding how the substitution on the left-hand portion of the core system would alter the metabolism profile, because that was alluded to initially as being a potential area for metabolic liability associated with the initial document. The compounds that were selected for med-ID, if you'll notice, they're also, the hepatocyte data is provided, so there was no need for there to be overlap, because Sue does provide, along with the metabolism profile, the actual intrinsic clearance values for both the rat and human hepatocytes that they were tested in. The 3 that were chosen for med-ID were of a similar reasoning, to understand the metabolism primarily, which was believed to be on the side chain, and also due to compound availability. Not all of the compounds that were originally disclosed have solid remaining, and we needed solid available to be sent to Sue, so therefore we had to work with what was available for us. Does that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. So the results that came back, so just taking the solubility and metabolism data, I guess the conclusions were that solubility is low, and that clearance is more rapid than would be desired. But also that the results from mouse and human were essentially equivalent, largely, but that we're going to have to work on both solubility and lengthening that metabolism profile. Is that the conclusion that everyone else is happy with from the data that were provided? I'll just bring up the actual. These things were uploaded to the lab notebook and may be browsed. Data were as shown. So degradation half-life in vitro and are shown there. So is that the essential conclusion, I guess, from the data, is that we want to lengthen, we want to increase those numbers.
Yeah, I think, Matt, because where we were before was that there was a potential concern that the metabolic stability might have just been a mouse-specific feature, but it looks as if it's across species, so human and mouse, and probably also rat, or also see similar metabolic processes.
Yep. Okay.
I think one of the other interesting features is that despite trying to stop metabolic turnover with substitution on the side chain, it seems like that didn't seem to alter the rapid rate of turnover. So that might not be the best route of trying to stop the turnover in
Good point. So our attention should really focus elsewhere, and I guess the metabolism ID work that came back, not confidential despite the label, so this has been cleared for release. Here are some of the numbers again, and here is some of the pictorial representations of what is thought to be going on. So generally, according to the MS and MSMS data, it appears as though there is hydroxylation happening on some part of the core, with the suspicion being that it's on the heterocyclic rings, the triazolopyrazine ring, somewhere, either on the ring itself or on the aromatic component that's attached there. And I guess that's not terribly surprising, but that's what the data is suggesting. Now, we don't have absolute confirmation of where on the structure hydroxylation may have happened. I think I'm right in saying, Paul, that further work is planned in the new year to try and get that information about where the hydroxylation is happening. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually more on the mechanism of the metabolism. So there's two questions. It could just be a standard CYP-mediated metabolism, or it could be this hydroxidase. So the studies are more to understand what the process is that is causing it. It's possible that we may be able to get more info on the site, but really because I think that's going to be more difficult because it's mass spec processes. So because it's somewhere into that core heterocycle, the chance of being able to see appropriate fragments that really nail down the position on the ring that's being metabolized, I think we have to be realistic. That's going to be more challenging. But knowing the mechanism will help in terms of deciding on the appropriate next steps.
Start thinking about using analogous structures with substituents in various positions, and taking our best shot if that's seen as being the way forward. But I guess waiting for the mechanism of how this is happening is the next step. I guess in terms of just the practicalities of what that means in terms of compound synthesis, to my mind, we still pursue in January completing the synthesis of some amides, but am I right? I mean, this doesn't alter necessarily the synthesis of some of the amides, even though it appears though when we do make those amides, we will have the same problem of metabolic clearance.
Well, I think there is still value in profiling some of those amides, and we'd actually thought, Joey can jump in a minute, but we think, you know, when we look at the data that we've got, although some of them are stable, they could be stable enough that we can actually progress an amide.
I agree with Paul. Just because we're seeing some oxidation, this is not actually telling us the amount of metabolite formation, so it may only be somewhat minor, because if you actually scroll up and look at the intrinsic or the clearance values for each of the compounds, some of them aren't actually that bad in comparison to some of the other structures that were shown on the last slide. So this is a positive for these compounds, that some of these may be good enough to eventually go in vivo. And I think what we've seen before with some of the amides in the earlier work that was done with the CRO is that they are, in general, have better hepatic stability in comparison to just the alkyl side chains.
That was going to be my next question, was, yeah, looking at the data. So yes, in table 2 at the bottom of the file, the compounds that are found in the mass spec analysis are listed. And yes, the one thing is the things missing, of course, is yes, the how much of these compounds is being seen. I didn't know if that at this stage was seen as being not particularly important, or maybe not particularly quantitative. But it did occur to me that if these are traces, then yes, the concern is maybe lessened.
I mean, we can go back and talk to Sue. The problem is that you're only going to be able to be quantitative because you've either got to quantify based on UV response or the response in the mass spec. And obviously, without having the standards, you can't calibrate between all the different metabolites. So we can go back to Sue. I suspect we won't be able to be more than semi-quantitative, you know, that it's a small amount, a large amount. With those caveats about interpreting across the differences, but we can see if we can get a bit more insight there. But I guess what we can do is to take the two together, that we know where the sites of metabolism are, and we know from the overall rates of clearance that we are too high.
So the short-term focus on the amides is therefore to take the hit that we know that it's likely these things will be metabolized to some extent on the heterocyclic core, but that our main focus initially is to increase solubility without sacrificing potency.
I think that would be difficult. It would be good, and if you remember as well, within the amides, you know, potency is relatively weak. So I think there's an important job in terms of making some more amides to really understand, can we improve potency, understand the SCR for driving potency. So there's good work that needs to be done there in parallel while we're waiting for these metabolism experiments. And again, it could be, you know, you do see that fairly often, that remote changes into a molecule can affect the site of metabolism. So it could be that insight comes from that, from some of those amides are more stable. And again, we'll look with Joey whether we can select a more diverse set of compounds and get intrinsic clearance on metabolic.
I just while we're talking about this then, and making some short-term plans for which compounds to make, I see a discussion going on the chat window there. There was this initial suggestion from Jerry about which amides to make. This is way back when we first started, and there was a suggestion to make some of these amides shown here. And I guess one of the things that Alice found is that a couple of suggested amides would require amines that are really quite expensive, and so that's it's maybe I mean really seriously expensive. It's maybe a slight issue there about which amides to make. So we can certainly try and start with something like this, but I think we may just have to think a little bit more about which amides which amines to couple here. Again, assuming we can get this. So I think as soon as we are at the position where we know that we're going to have a decent amount of this carboxylic acid, so the core that will give us 2 and 3 here, we can have a more focused conversation about, well, which amides are we going to? No, we can't do that because the synthesis is not synthesis unfortunately requires that you start with amides early on according to the synthetic scheme here, because that's attached before the substitution reaction and before the oxidative cyclization. So I think once we've got the carboxylic acid here, we're going to have that conversation about which amides we're going to couple. There's been a lot of discussion on the chat window from Alice and Jerry about these amines and maybe which we could start with. Does anyone want to jump in on the audio here, or or have you discussed things in the chat? We can pursue that. Subsequent to our getting a good route to the carboxylic acid, we can pursue that later. I did want to just check one thing here. So overnight, Chris Sathan put up a blog post in which he'd done a search of the available literature, so PubChem and SureChem, to find compounds that were known to be similar to the compounds that we were looking at. And the blog post is up on the screen here. The conclusion immediately was that the set of compounds that we're looking at is unusual and bears no real similarity to anything that's known in PubChem, which is interesting in itself. Just as we were talking, though, I was wondering about the nature of the search. So it'd be good if Chris would come in here. The compounds that I think you searched on from reading this are the ether-linked compounds, right? So in other words, the set that has the, sorry, I'll bring it back up again. The set that has the ether linkage here, so the compounds we started talking about at the beginning of the meeting. Now, that compound is of interest for resynthesis and separation of enantiomers, but most of the subsequent stuff we're talking about is, of course, the amides. Similar kind of structure, but with an amide linker here. More along the lines of the compounds we were just discussing, so these over here. I wonder if doing a search on that core would change the outcome, or do you think that compounds that are similar to these, an amide linker, would have come up in that search, Chris? Do you want to just talk a little bit about the search that you carried out? Chris, if you enable your audio, it would be just on the top of the screen. You can speak to us.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, faintly. If you can speak slightly louder, it would be better.
Okay.
That's good.
Right. Yeah. The set I searched was the 118 in that SD file. Right.
Yep.
So if there's anything not in there, point me to where, and it's very different. You can point me to where they are.
Yes,
Yeah?
there was a.
So were those amides you're talking about? Were they in that 118?
Yeah, I actually don't know. I will have to. I'll have to check that.
Well, we'll check. Yeah. So I just pulled, as I said, I just pulled that SD. Okay. Okay. So then, if you whack that whole lot, you have to rank down to a Tanimoto of 0.9 before you see anything. So they are interestingly novel, and it's quite interesting because if you were a commercial operation, you'd say, oh, you'd be rubbing your hands and going off to the patent office and filing. But it's actually, it's a bit frustrating to me because I can't get into start walking through series with other activities and things, or even finding suppliers hits for you because they're just not there beyond what I can show you there. There is that weak hit to, yeah, it may be a red herring, but that patent was on a sodium channel inhibition. Yeah, so that's why it rang a bell with your the PFAL ion channel inhibition that has been reported.
Indeed. Okay, so thank you very much. I mean, it's fantastic that you did that because it's a key thing for us to check, of course, is that as we're moving to a set of new compounds, whether there are existing compounds anywhere,
yeah,
and maybe commercial, but maybe
see,
also from academic lab.
Yeah, and now I've actually put a couple of the compounds in that constitutes both I can run an alert for it, and of course in the goodness of time it takes a while, but all the relationships will be pre-computed. The three So we'll so the nearest neighbours will be automatically shown to you when you click on the entry.
That would become an automatic process if we ensure that the 118 compounds are submitted to Campbell, right?
Yes, it will. Yeah. As I suggested, you should wait until, well, not wait. I mean, you won't get in before Campbell 18, which is probably a couple of months away. So I suggest in the new year you you collate that set with, or just put everything that you have activity data for into the way Campbell likes it, and then it'll go through and come around into PubChem a few weeks later.
Okay. Yes, I'm seeing the Campbell guys in the new year, in the beginning of January, so that will be on our discussion list.
Sure, that would be.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so that just means.
Sorry, I was interested whether you should be useful to nail down whether that channel is your primary target or not.
Sure, that would be nice to know what the target is. Of course, it would be nice. Yes, I don't know how we do that at this stage, but that would be lovely to know.
So what I can say, Matt, isn't it, is that all the data to date shows a good correlation. So where we've tested potent analogues in Kieran Kirk's PF80P4 assay, they have been active, and the very close analogues that were inactive against malaria were also inactive in the channel. So that all the evidence is pointing to PF80P4 at the moment, and there's another set of compounds that's with Kieran at the moment for some further work. So it's a work in progress, but from the.
Yes, there is a also the group at the Structural Genomics Consortium who are looking at obtaining the structure for PF80P4 are interested in if they can get the structure to do co-crystallization studies to see if we have a genuine binding event, which would be great. So I guess we have to hold back until that's happened. But we have another group there that's interested in working with us to identify the mode of action of these compounds. I guess I should stress one small semantic scientific point. When I talk to Kieran, he makes it clear that he views these as ion regulation assays because he doesn't actually know if the assay is actually for PF80P4. So it's not as if it's a enzyme target and a binding activity assay. It's an ion regulation assay, with the assumption being that PF80P4 is the target. Subtle point, and sometimes we forget when we talk about the PF80P4 assay. Okay, so thank you, Chris, and we are I think nearing the end of the discussion of the most recent chemistry and biology, with some clear action items for the synthesis. Several people are looking at, and there is some. So there is continued need for this compound here as a route to the amides. There is a continued need for a set of early amides, and for which the amines will be determined in the new year once we know they have a good supply of this compound. And several people are trying to get this compound. Alice is pursuing also the synthesis of the ethylene compound, and then we will deal with the separation of enantiomers of those. Once made, the amides will then be sent for potency, obviously, and also for Kieran Kirk's assay in the new year. We hope to have a set of compounds, some of these amides, to send to Kieran by the end of January. We'll have to see how the chemistry goes. So that's the emphasis on the triazolopyridine series, the current series. Now it's just gone 8 p.m. for Sydney time, so we've been going for just about an hour. There were a couple of other things on the agenda, but which are much less important for our discussion here. Just to summarize, a few of the other compounds from previous series have been sent to Kieran because he was interested in seeing whether or not these also were hitting the same ion regulation assay. So we send a few other compounds, but we'll obviously be sending some of the new series compounds next month once they're made. And a couple of other things were being tied up on the previous series just for publication purposes, but we don't need to go through those now, but they're listed on the agenda. A few of the other things, like I said, in terms of how the project works and how the websites work, I think we'll defer to a more focused meeting next month, where I think I'll try to invite people along who maybe aren't scientifically focused necessarily, but who maybe have some insight into how we might structure the website so that we solve the continual and basic problem that we have of how people can find the relevant data quickly, particularly medicinal chemists, and to make sure that the navigation is straightforward to recent items. One thing we had done recently is to instigate this new label. So in GitHub, which is something we're using quite productively for conversations, we've instigated a new label here, which is being synthesized now, which is attached to any compounds which are currently being made by whomever. This is useful because we can remove the label and add it according to whether the compound has been made or not. But we can use this as a way of easily identifying which compounds are currently being synthesized. The only thing I'd say about that is that it's very important that when we use this, we do have context. So, for example, with Matt's compound that he's currently looking at, this is on a different series, so we're not prioritizing it in this meeting. This is for another compound in series 3, which we're not, which Alice is not focusing on primarily at the moment. In this case, so here is an example of how this is being used. So you can quickly see that this compound is currently being made. It's important, of course, that once it has been made, that it's then removed from this. But I think it's also important that when we post things of this kind, and this applies to everybody, that we take the extra few minutes just to put the context there of which compound is this, which series is this compound a member of, why is it being made, and links to the relevant wiki and to the relevant lab book entries, so that should someone go to this and be interested in this compound, they can quickly go to where there is more information about the context of why this compound is being made. So again, it's one of these issues where time is needed to contextualize everything, so that should you hit the project at a certain point, you can easily find everything else you need. That I think is something which needs a separate discussion, which we don't really have time for today, and is our continual focus of what we're doing in Sydney. But it's really very important that people do keep on feeding back on problems that they have in navigating the site, because it's very important that we don't lose people. Now, what I'd like to do now, as far as I'm concerned, we've gone through the most important things on the agenda. What I'd like to do now is ask if anyone has anything they want to say about the science, the chemistry of the biology that maybe we haven't discussed, or and then subsequently, if there's anything else people want to talk about that we on other aspects of the project that we haven't talked about yet. If there is nothing, I might pop out of screen share. I should just actually mention, in case to make sure that we haven't missed anything in the slides, Jerry very helpfully forwarded a few things about action items from the last meeting. I think we've covered these as part of the agenda. So a lot of the things that we said that we do, the M&B in particular said that they do for this meeting have been completed, and those are kind of wrapped up in the agenda that we've been going through. There's also on this PowerPoint, should you wish to see, a very useful slide that Stefan Debert from Lawrence University of Wisconsin forwarded about what his students are going to be doing. So this is an expansion of the route that we just saw to this key carboxylic acid, and he'll be addressing some of this chemistry with his students in the new year, which is great. There's also a summary there of some of the neighbor compounds that his students have made as part of their undergraduate lab class, which are now going to be sent for evaluation. There is one action item on this actually, which is just that I've had a look at the NMR data for some of these compounds, and I'm just waiting on someone else who is familiar with the synthesis of these compounds to give the green light to say that the NMR spectra indicate these compounds are A, fine, and B, pure. So I'll just ping people again on that, so that we can get the green light to send those compounds for evaluation, because we do have a lab that's ready to evaluate these compounds. But in fact, assembling this PowerPoint is actually rather a useful exercise, and of course the PowerPoint is available on the lab notebook, and this can be then linked as a way of giving people a a partial update of the project as of December 2013. Okay, what I'm going to do is come out of this screen share so I can go back to the main site, the main Adobe Connect site. And I just wanted to see if anybody else had anything that they wanted to talk about in terms of anything else we haven't covered so far. So there's been a huge chat window here, which is great. If Alice, you could do the usual thing of copying that to Word or something and saving it so we capture it, that would be very useful. Does anybody else want to raise something we haven't yet discussed? If not, if we have covered everything that we think is necessary, then we can stop for now. Multiple people are typing. You can speak if you wish. If anything else comes up, then of course we do have various places where people can discuss what's happened at the meeting. Just to remind people that there is a Google Plus community for open source malaria, where people can describe things, but otherwise there are various other ways in which you can get in touch with us, ideally in the public domain. I'd like to, I think I'm right in saying that today is Joey's last day at MMV, so I just wanted to thank her for all her very, very useful inputs to the project while she's been at MMV. It's been really fantastic. Hopefully you stay in touch with the project. That would be wonderful, but in as much as you're able to, given that I guess you're going back to your day job. And but hopefully stay in touch. It's very easy to do that, and we'd love you to. It's very nice that Devon and Inga are here. So Devon and Inga are undergrad students who are also part of the project. It's great that you're here. Inga's going to start a project in my lab in January for 6 weeks or so over the summer, and we're doing some synthesis as well, which is great. Okay, so if we're done, then that's great. Thank you for coming along, everybody. Thanks for the some slightly difficult issues of timing. It's a nice, well, it's a rainy morning here in Geneva, but it's rather late on a Friday night in Sydney, so we should probably wrap up. If anyone's joining us from America, that's astonishing because it's the middle of the night. Okay, if everyone is happy, we can stop the meeting, and I just want to thank you all for coming along. Thanks for supporting the project, and have a very Merry Christmas, everybody.